Hi guys, it's Michelle, and today's video is going to be another true crime video. It is all about the Murdoch murders. Literally everyone has been talking about this case, and it is one of the craziest things that I have ever personally researched. It's insane. If you've been literally living under a rock, the Murdochs are a family from Low Country, South Carolina, and they have several mysterious murders that are all connected to them. The story is a little bit hard to follow, so I think how I'm gonna do it is chronologically, because obviously if you guys have heard anything about the case, you probably have heard of the big 2019 boat crash that occurred. That's probably the most talked about instance, especially in the Netflix documentary. It was focused mostly on the boat crash, and it's a super important part, but I'm gonna start from the beginning so that we kind of get a feel for what's going on and how death has really surrounded this family for many years. So the Murdoch family is a family of the Low Country region of South Carolina. They were super famous in the town because they were super high regarded, they were very rich, and the Murdoch family had been the main part of the judicial system in the town of Hampton for decades. They were the top lawyers, the lawyer that you go to. It's the Murdochs. Everyone knew them. On the surface, the Murdochs seemed like the perfect family. Alex and Maggie Murdoch had their two sons, Buster and Paul. They lived a very lavish life. They had lots of nice things. The kids had lots of friends in school. They were popular. They seemed like the perfect happy family, but that was only on the surface. There was a lot going on with the Murdochs that was very dark. The stuff that was going on in the Murdoch family behind closed doors, I don't think anyone could have predicted it. It's important to note that these two cases that we're going to talk about first that happened did not connect necessarily to the Murdochs as much as they did after the boat crash and after the double homicide that took place at the Murdoch family home. These two cases were people who were involved with the Murdoch family, but it was something that people didn't connect the dots to until June of 2021, which we're going to talk about. So first, starting off, was the death of Stephen Smith on July 8th of 2015. Stephen Smith was a 19-year-old boy, and he was found dead on Sandy Run Road in Hampton County, South Carolina. So the local police kind of ruled this as a hit and run pretty quickly, but that didn't make any sense to the highway patrol, who sees hit and runs all of the time, and they were very certain that Stephen Smith did not die in a hit-and-run situation for multiple reasons that make a lot of sense. For one, there was no debris of any kind from any sort of vehicle. There was no skid marks on the road. There was no evidence whatsoever of a hit and run. Stephen Smith also had severe head trauma, which is what he died from. But he had very few scratches on his body, and his shoes were literally still on him. It was something the highway patrol found very suspicious. In fact, the highway patrol officer who was on site at the scene of the crime claimed that there was absolutely no evidence of this case being a hit and run. But for some reason, regardless, the sheriff's office just labeled this as a hit and run. Stephen's car was found nearby. It was broken down and the gas cap was open, and this led people to believe he had went out and walked to get gas. Although this doesn't really make a lot of sense. First of all, it's 2015. Who the hell's doing that? Like, call someone. And Stephen's family believed that he would have definitely called someone and not gone and walked to get gas by himself. Second of all, he was walking in the wrong direction of the nearest gas station. And third, and most damning, he left his wallet in the car. If you're about to go for a multiple-mile walk to a gas station, the one thing you're gonna want to make sure you have is definitely a way to pay for the gas. When the highway patrol was doing their initial investigation, they heard from about 12 different people the name Buster Murdoch being thrown around. Buster Murdoch is the oldest son of Alec and Maggie Murdoch, and it was rumored that he had a relationship with Stephen Smith. Stephen Smith was an openly gay kid, and honestly, I can't imagine how hard that would have been in like that area of South Carolina. I feel like it's just a very conservative area. 2015 it would have been hard. Apparently before Stephen had died, he told his mom that he was going to be going on a fishing trip with a boy he was hanging out with, kind of seeing, and he said that he couldn't say who his name was, but the man that he was hooking up with was a prominent man from Hampton County. Stephen also claimed that if he ever told anyone the name of this person, that they would be shocked. So I would say the main conspiracy theory that investigators have, at least now, but like I said, they ruled it as a hit and run at the time, was that Buster and Stephen had some sort of relationship and someone found out or something that led Buster or another Murdoch or someone in general make sure that Stephen would never tell anyone about his relationship with Buster by killing him. Some people even believe that it could have been an accident, that they were maybe like going there to threaten Stephen and like beat him up or something, but then he died from the wounds that he got. I don't know, but either way, Buster Murdoch's name was constantly tied to the Stephen Smith investigation. Years later, Paul's girlfriend Morgan was actually messaged on Facebook by someone saying, hey, like, your boyfriend / his brother are probably connected to this Stephen Smith murder. We have every reason to believe that. And when she asked Paul and Buster about it, they said, no, we didn't kill that F slur. Morgan said that they were just like laughing about it and making it like a joke, and it's just really fucked up. Based on the consistencies and obviously the area where they're from, it makes complete sense that the Murdochs would not want their son to be gay. Like, honestly, I just feel like they just didn't. It's probably not a coincidence that the Murdoch name was brought up so many times throughout the interview. And you have to understand, these people were terrified of the Murdochs because they were a family with so much power. They literally are the law. Like, they are quite literally the town lawyers. It's a small town. They have so much power and money and could make anything disappear. Almost anything. That we'll get into. Makes complete sense why people would be afraid to speak out. So honestly, I'm surprised that so many people even did with the Stephen Smith case and told them Buster Murdoch's name. Also, the day that Stephen died, his father went down to the police station, and before he could even talk to the police about what happened, Alec's brother, Randy Murdoch, was offering him to take on this case free of charge. Now, why would he do that? They weren't family friends. It makes no sense. Why the hell is this man offering to represent Stephen Smith's family for free? Just free legal representation. They thought it was suspicious, but they kind of just went with it for a bit, and they wanted the usernames and passwords to all of Stephen's social media accounts to see if they were able to find any information about anything. It's obviously suspicious because, of course, Buster and Stephen had been talking over the phone, over social media, Instagram, whatever. This gave the Murdoch family the complete access to delete anything that they didn't want the public to know about, and basically erase any possible ties between Buster and Stephen. Stephen's mother also claims that she saw Alec and Randy Murdoch at the crime scene an hour after Stephen's body had been moved. Honestly, everything about this was extremely suspicious coming from the Murdochs. It's like, even though maybe they would not have even been a thought on like people's mind, they kind of inserted themselves into the scenario, which I find to be very interesting and kind of a pattern that the Murdochs have. It's like they insert themselves to cover up their own crimes, but it's almost as if they're kind of giving themselves away when they do that, but we'll get into it. But that was the first instance, that we know of the Murdoch family being involved in some sort of way with a murder. The next happened in February of 2018. On February 2nd of 2018, emergency services were called to the Murdoch family home. Their longtime housekeeper / nanny, Gloria Satterfield, had fallen down the stairs and was unconscious. So basically what the Murdochs said had happened was that Gloria was standing on the stoop and the family dogs kind of came and tripped her, and she fell backwards down the stoop stairs onto the pavement and just completely was unconscious. Gloria Satterfield was non-responsive in the hospital until she sadly passed away on February 26th of 2018. So this on the surface seemed like an accident. There was no suspicion around the Murdochs, like I said, really until 2019 when the boat crash happened that we'll talk about later. This was definitely something that was overlooked, and therefore the investigation followed the protocol of an accident as well, and there was no autopsy done, and honestly, it was a very fumbled situation. Alec Murdoch actually told Gloria Satterfield's 2 children that they should sue him, that way that they could get money from the insurance that he has on the house. Gloria's family was like really happy that Alec was doing that, because obviously this is just a super tragic situation, and Gloria Satterfield had been working for the Murdochs for 20 plus years. Like, literally, she basically raised Paul. Like, Paul really loved Gloria a lot. Something that's interesting to know is that a month before Gloria Satterfield had died, Alec Murdoch took out a commercial insurance policy on his house a month before Gloria fell. Gloria Satterfield's family never received any money from this settlement, which it was later found out that Alec Murdoch had collected $4.3 million from Gloria Satterfield's death. He pocketed the money. He didn't give a cent of it to any of Gloria's family, and honestly, they had no idea that this was even happening at the time. They didn't even know about this until the media knew about it. Alec had told them that the case was still processing, that it was just going through the judicial system, and that they had not had any updates, but that was not true. Alec's insurance policy paid him $4.3 million that was supposed to go directly to Gloria's family. Is so beyond fucked up. Like, I genuinely think you have to be a level of pure fucking evil to steal from 2 kids who just lost their mother. And especially a woman who helped raise your children, that's disgusting. That is just disgusting. It's terrible. Before Alec had been found out that he was stealing this money, Gloria's son was literally kicked out of the home that he lived in with Gloria, because the house went into foreclosure because he couldn't afford it, because he didn't have any money from a settlement. And Alec just stood by and watched this all happening, and meanwhile knowing that he was pocketing all of the money from a death that happened on his property that a lot of people believe was not so accidental. We'll get into that a bit later, but Gloria Satterfield's case has been reopened, so it's definitely something that is on the mind of the South Carolina Police Department. In time, 2019 comes around, no one had any idea that Alec was stealing money from anybody, especially not Gloria Satterfield's family. No one knew anything like that was going on. People had talked about Stephen Smith and how Buster could have been connected, but genuinely the Murdochs were not really on the radar of too many people. Like, they were, but they weren't. But something happened in 2019 that would change the trajectory of the Murdoch family's lives forever, because this was something they couldn't really get out of. It was something that happened, direct result of the Murdochs, and everyone knew it. The boat crash that happened involving Paul Murdoch was what really got the Murdoch name out of South Carolina and all over national news. On the night of February 23rd, 2019, Alec Murdoch's youngest son, Paul, and his girlfriend, Morgan, and their friends who were also coupled, Connor Cook and Miley Altman, and Mallory Beach and Anthony Cook. The couples were headed to an oyster roast, and they decided to take Paul's boat. There's a lot of drinking involved. These kids were only 19 at the time. Paul actually used his older brother Buster's ID to buy alcohol that day. You can literally watch it in the security cameras. At about 7 p.m., they arrive at the oyster roast, and they stay at this party till around midnight. Multiple people at the oyster roast advised them to not take the boat home because it was a really cold and foggy night, and Paul was severely intoxicated. Paul ultimately, he was kind of like, it's my boat, I'm driving it. Everyone wanted to go home except for Connor and Paul. They wanted to stop off at a bar in downtown Beaufort. They stopped at this bar called Luther's. Again, Paul used Buster's ID and Connor used a fake ID, and they got 2 rounds of shots after already being very drunk. The rest of the crew didn't even want to go into the bar with them, so they all kind of just hung out outside. When Paul and Connor got back to the dock, it was very clear that Paul was incredibly drunk, and Anthony had offered to drive the boat, and Paul just made a huge scene, screaming, being like, it's my fucking boat, like, I'm driving, just being an absolute fucking nuisance. And he refused to let anyone else drive, and he drove, left the dock in downtown Beaufort at around 1:15 a.m. And essentially the last moments before the boat crash was very hectic and crazy. Paul was obliterated. He was having fights with his girlfriend Morgan. He hit her. He was just being a complete dick. He was driving very insanely, and he was doing like donuts in the water, going in crazy fast circles. He even literally left the wheel of the boat unattended multiple times throughout the night because he was fighting with his girlfriend Morgan. At around 2:20 a.m., the boat crashed into Archer's Creek Bridge. Mallory Beach was ejected from the boat. Connor was pretty badly beaten up on his chin. Him and Morgan and Miley were rushed to the hospital to treat these injuries. Paul also headed to the hospital, but Anthony stayed behind because they could not find Mallory, which must have been so heartbreaking. I can't even imagine. Literally moments before, Mallory was just like sitting on Anthony's lap, and then she's just gone. Connor was treated for a broken jaw. Morgan's hand was injured pretty badly. Paul was being completely uncooperative in the hospital, so they took his blood, and he was 3 times the drink drive limit. All of the parents of children who were involved in this crash, their main concern was obviously making sure their children were okay, but their concern was with where the hell is Mallory Beach? Like, why can't we find her? Why is no one worrying about this? But this was not the case for Alec Murdaugh. He was talking to Connor and his parents, saying that he would take care of him because there had been some speculation that Connor was actually the one who was driving the boat and not Paul. Connor immediately claimed to his parents that this was not true and that Paul was the one who was driving the boat. Connor had taken over the wheel a few times while Paul literally left the wheel. But when the boat actually crashed, it was Paul who was driving. And that was proven to be true. I just think it is so telling and so insane that there is a child who is missing from this boat crash, which is what all of the other parents are focused on. They don't give a shit who was driving the boat. The only person who's concerned with getting a story straight is Alec Murdaugh himself. He is down there trying to change the narrative of what actually happened, which is crazy because even if Connor had been driving the boat, that should be the least prioritized thing of what's going on right now. Alec being down there trying to make sure that he would clear his son's name was absolutely insane and so disrespectful to Mallory's family. Again, this is another instance of the Murdochs kind of stepping in to cover something up that they think they're being sly about. I think it's kind of doing the reverse effect, and it's immediately making people suspicious and mad. You can even hear Anthony talk about how nothing bad was going to happen to Paul Murdaugh because of who he was.
Y'all know Alec Murdaugh?
Oh yeah, I know his name.
That's his son.
That show driving the boat.
Good luck.
So, despite Alec's efforts, it was deemed impossible for Connor to have been driving the boat just based on his injuries, based on where he landed. It was physically impossible, and it was confirmed that Paul was the one who was driving. Search for Mallory began and sadly ended 8 days later when they found her body 5 miles from where the boat crashed. On April 18th of 2019, Paul Murdaugh was indicted and charged with 3 felony counts of boating under the influence, including causing the death of Mallory Beach, and also seriously injuring 2 of the other passengers. And yet still, Paul had the audacity to plead not guilty to the charges, which is just insane. Paul was never even officially arrested for this. This kid didn't even spend a single night in jail. His mugshot was literally just a picture that they took of him, like, at the courthouse. What the fuck? Like, that is so fucked up. But he was out on bond and awaiting trial. Even though Paul single-handedly caused the death of Mallory Beach, he pretty much had no repercussions of this. And it's obviously likely because of his status and his family's status within the community. Not only that, but COVID obviously hit, so the trial just kept getting pushed back, and the trial ended up never happening because on June 7th of 2021, Paul and his mother Maggie Murdoch were found dead at their house. On June 7th of 2021, Alec Murdaugh called 911 frantically. He was at the Moselle house, which was their hunting property. He came home and found his wife and son dead. Alec's story actually changed quite a few times, which we'll talk about, but what he told police from the night that Paul and Maggie died was that Paul, Maggie, and Alec had dinner together, and then after dinner, Paul and Maggie headed down to the kennels that was on the Moselle property, but Alec remained in the main house and he took a nap. And then after waking up from his nap, he tried to call Maggie. She didn't answer, but he didn't think anything of it, so he headed out to go visit his mother, who is suffering from late stages of dementia. And then after returning home from his mother's house, that was when Alec found Maggie and Paul's bodies, and subsequently when he called the police. Something that's incredibly important to note is that Alec Murdoch was immediately from the jump, from the 911 call, trying to spin the narrative that this was related to the boat crash. Just listen to the audio of the 911 call.
He's been being threatened by, my son had a boat wreck. He's been being threatened for months and months and months.
So he's immediately putting into the investigator's head that perhaps whoever murdered Paul and Maggie were getting some sort of revenge for the death of Mallory Beach. I just don't think that that is something that you would really necessarily be focused on if you come home and see your wife and son have been murdered. From past situations, we know Alec is very well known for immediately trying to spin a story and cover shit up. So I think that that is quite important to note. So the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, aka SLED, we'll be referring to them as SLED from now on, pretty quickly announced to the public that there was not a public threat. Even though there was a double homicide, they felt like there was no threat to the public and that this was a targeted murder. When we talk about who possibly could have murdered Maggie and Paul Murdoch, I think it's very important to talk about what happened earlier that day. Earlier on June 7th, 2021, Alec Murdoch was having a meeting with the CFO of his law firm, Jean Seckinger, where she claimed that the law firm had collected money from settlements. About $2.8 million was missing, essentially, and she had the suspicion, and he knew that she had the suspicion that Alec had pocketed the money. So the chat between Alec and Jean was very high stress. Obviously, that's someone who's working with him for 22 years accusing him of stealing money. And of course, it got heated, but things really cooled down once Alec actually received a phone call that was apparently about his father's condition and that it was worsening. This made Jean back off and be like, we can just talk about this later, go be with your family. And then less than 12 hours later, Paul and Maggie Murdoch were dead. Paul and Maggie's death completely took the heat off of Alec and his potential financial crimes. This completely made people forget because obviously this man's family had just been murdered. It wasn't on the top of everyone's mind to now talk about the financial crimes. So any missing funds and stolen money was put on the back burner until September of 2021. On September 3rd of 2021, Alec Murdoch was forced to resign from his law firm due to the partners finding out and confirming that he had been stealing money from the firm and from their clients. And then it gets even more dicey. On September 4th of 2021, Alec Murdoch called after being shot in the head on the side of the road. Obviously, he was alive. He was kind of grazed with a bullet. And what he claimed happened was that he was fixing a flat tire and some random man came and shot him. On September 6th of 2021, Alec Murdoch released a statement through his lawyers that he had had a 20-year opioid addiction. He was resigning from the law firm and checking into rehab, which we obviously now know that he didn't really resign from the law firm at all, was more so fired. On September the 14th, it was found out that Alec Murdoch had actually hired the person who shot him. His name was Curtis Edward Smith, but he went by Eddie, and that was a former client of his, but also Alec's drug dealer. Alec Murdoch claimed that he hired Eddie to shoot and kill him on September 4th, 2021, because he wanted to commit suicide, but he also wanted Buster, his remaining living son, to receive his $10 million life insurance policy. So everything was happening at once. On September 15th of 2021, SLED announced that they were reopening the investigation of Gloria Satterfield because they had found out that Alec stole money from her death lawsuit. So on September 16th of 2021, Alec Murdoch was arrested, charged with fraud and conspiracy surrounding the botched suicide attempt. His lawyers Flores released a statement saying that he was depressed over the loss of his family and he was abusing painkillers at the time that he came up with the scheme, basically claiming that Alec was not in the right state of mind and that he wanted to check into rehab. And the judge actually allowed this, and they ended up releasing him and letting him check into rehab until October 14th of 2021 when Alec was at a rehab facilitation in Florida. He was arrested and charged stealing millions of dollars from the sons of Gloria Satterfield. He was jailed at this point and he has not been out since, and we're gonna go over that because there have been many things, including the murder trial that happened between October and now. Alec Murdaugh was now on trial for the murders of Paul and Maggie Murdoch, and his trial began on January 25th of 2023. And so much new information about the case was released at this point, and it made sense why investigators believed that Alec Murdaugh killed Maggie and Paul. I would say the most damning piece of evidence that was released in the trial that was very important to the case was that on Paul's phone, he had Snapchat proof minutes before he was murdered, the suspected time of death anyway. He was recording the dogs down at the kennel, and you can actually hear Alec's voice in the video, even though Alec claimed that he never went to the kennel.
Hey, he's got a bird in his mouth.
Bubba. Hey, Bubba.
It's a guinea.
This is a chicken. Come here, Bubba. Come here, Cash. Come here, Bubba. Cash. Quit.
So Alec actually on the stand admitted to lying about being at the kennel. Basically, he claimed that he panicked, but he claimed that he still wasn't there at the time of the murders. Obviously, he's going to say that, but he basically said that what had happened was he was down at the kennels with Paul and Maggie, and then he went back up to the house, took a quick 10-minute nap, and then headed over to his parents' house, and then went back to Moselle and found Maggie and Paul dead. Obviously, him lying about ever being at the kennel makes no sense for an innocent person to do. Obviously, this was a pretty damning piece of evidence within the trial. Alec Murdaugh's mother's caretaker, Shelley Smith, was actually called to the stand as well because she obviously saw Alec the night of the murders. He did in fact go to visit his mom, and she claims that she felt like he was really pushing her to lie and say that he was there for 30 to 40 minutes when really he was only there for 15 to 20 minutes. Like, she kind of just got the vibe like he wasn't outwardly being like, hey, tell everyone I was here for 30 to 40 minutes, but he was just kind of like, yeah, if anyone asks, I was here for 30 to 40 minutes. Sly, but it was very there. And without missing a beat, Alec also offered Shelley money to help pay for her wedding. Very suspicious piece of evidence, and I think very important in the outcome of this case. Maggie's sister, Marianne, was also called to the stand, and she testified that she found the conversation between her and Alec after the murder of her sister and her nephew to be very suspicious and strange. She claimed that Alec was not at all focused on who did this and who could have killed his family, but more so focused on the boat crash once again, and he was focused on the fact that he wanted Paul's name to be cleared from the boat crash situation, which makes so little sense. This happened years ago, so it was just very, very strange timing. The eldest Murdoch son, Buster, also took the stand defending his father, and he claimed that he does not believe that his father would have ever hurt his mom or his brother. And Alec Murdaugh finally took the stand, and he admitted to lying to the police, like I said. He also made a pretty interesting statement that he was taking up to 2,000 milligrams of painkillers every day, which is an absurd amount considering all of the people around him had no idea that he had a problem. Claimed that he was so stressed out the night of the murders that that's why he lied to the police about going down to the dog kennel, because he had pocket full of pills that were illegal and he was just nervous all around. Alec also claims that Paul had confronted Alec about his drug use about a month before the murders because Maggie had found drugs in Alec's computer case. Which again feels like stupid admission because I feel like that could be another motive for why Alec would potentially want to kill his family. Trial finally ended on March 2nd of 2023. Alec Murdaugh was found guilty of the murders of his son Paul Murdaugh and his wife Maggie Murdaugh. He was sentenced to life in prison, but It's not quite over yet. Even though the case is over, we're pretty sure we got the guy. Like, most people believe that Alec was the killer in the scenario. We still have a lot of questions. He has not been charged for any of his financial crimes yet, which he has over millions of dollars that he embezzled and stole from his own company and from people who were suffering from the loss of a loved one. That is all going to be investigated. Also, the death of Gloria Satterfield and the death of Stephen Smith were both reopened. These cases have been reopened and are being further investigated, which means that potentially Buster Murdoch could be facing a trial at some point if the police find any reason to believe that he was involved with Stephen Smith's death. I just think that this is such an interesting family all around. It is so terrible, everything that happened, honestly. Like, of course, Paul was a little shit for driving drunk and literally killing Mallory Beach, and he should have been held 100% accountable for that. I do think that it is unfair and really sad that Maggie and Paul were just murdered out of cold blood by their own father/husband. It's just a terrible story. It just shows what money can do to you, how evil of a person Alec Murdoch truly is, and I feel like we've just scraped the surface, which is insane because who knows how much more evidence there is out there of the Murdochs essentially just screwing over people and potentially killing people. There could be more murders that have taken place that we don't even know about yet. But I would love to hear your thoughts on the Murdaugh family, on every case involved. But that is it for today's video. If you guys liked it, please give it a big thumbs up. Let me know in the comments below what you guys think about these cases and the Murdochs in general. Make sure you follow me on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, and subscribe for new videos every single week, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!